After UFC 287, there's a lot of talk about the championship fight between Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira. The two fighters have some history in the ring. The fight took place on Saturday, April 8th, and was their fourth in combat sports and second in mixed martial arts. The result of the bout was a win for Adesanya after he knocked out Pereira, taking back his middleweight title after losing it at UFC 281 by TKO. That win has many calling for a rematch between the two fighters for a complete trilogy in the UFC. That isn't the only thing from the match that has people talking. Another hot topic is Adesanya's post-win celebration. After he knocked out his rival and the fight called in his favor, Adesanya began a long celebration. He started by standing over his opponent and pretending to shoot arrows at him. This was a jab at Pereira's signature walkout motions. He followed that up with some breakdancing moves with the UFC middleweight title belt wrapped around his waist.
This time he didn't let him off the hook.
And it's crazy how he called it. He knew that he was going to be able to get it done and get it done.
But it didn't end there. At one point after the match and before the post-fight interview, Adesanya pointed to someone in the crowd and mockingly dropped to the canvas. That person he pointed out was his opponent's son. Many have criticized the fighter for the act, calling it pathetic. That's right. What exactly is the history like between Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira? As we touched upon, the two have had several fights against each other in the past. These fights also span 7 years across two different sports. Their kickboxing matches, which were their first two bouts, both ended with victories for Alex Pereira. One of those victories was by knockout, and the other was by the judge's decision. In the UFC match, Pereira came out victorious again, earning the UFC middleweight title with a TKO. That left the fighters with a 3-0 record in favor of Pereira. It also makes sense why Adesanya was so excited and eager to celebrate his win. UFC 281 was his chance at redemption, and he finally beat his rival. Not only did he accomplish this feat, but he also won his title back. His initial celebration of defeating his opponent makes sense. Some might look at his arrow shooting into his opponent as him finally conquering the final boss. However, that doesn't explain why Adesanya chose to target Pereira's son in his celebration.
He was out cold.
Wow, he did.
Oh my goodness.
He got him bad.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
That's what's got everyone talking. So why did Adesanya target Pereira's son? Pereira has beaten Adesanya every other time they've fought, with 2 of those fights being knockouts. One of those instances was their second bout as kickboxers. When Adesanya was knocked out, Pereira and his son celebrated. Pereira's son mocked Adesanya at the time by dropping onto the canvas to mimic the way the fighter fell. Adesanya remembered that, and on Saturday he called the taunt out. As we mentioned earlier, Adesanya pointed at Pereira's son and mimicked the same motion, dropping to the mat like he was knocked out. Video of the incident shows Pereira's 12-year-old son crying in response to the taunt. Spectators and fans at home took to social media to express their opinions on the incident. Many were outraged and called Adesanya pathetic and childish for his behavior. They expressed that it was especially awful because Adesanya is an adult who, at the moment, taunted a child. Others said that it wasn't really that big of a deal. Their logic was that taunting is a part of fighting, and Pereira's son needed to learn that lesson. Adesanya himself later admitted that it was petty of him to do that, but he also didn't care. Harsh. He recalled the child's initial taunting of him years earlier, and went on to say that he and Alex Pereira are still cool and respect each other. Is that true though? What did Alex Pereira have to say about the exchange between his son and Adesanya? The Brazilian fighter commented on the issue later in a video for his YouTube channel. Like Adesanya said, the two are on decent terms. Overall, Pereira was unfazed by his opponent's actions, saying, "I don't know, I wouldn't do the same." He didn't come across as too bothered by the flop. Taking their rivalry into account, he also noted that Adesanya seemed really happy with the win and had good reason to be. He also dismissed it, but clearly said that he would not do the same if he were in that scenario. Pereira even said that he likes to mess around with his own son, taking into account that his son has probably been influenced by other people. Ultimately, it looks like Pereira took the high road with his response to the incident. He took the heat off his rival by saying that if it made him feel better, it didn't affect him. He also commented on how he views the action by saying he himself would never do that, calling Adesanya a kid as well. How did other fighters and pros in the industry respond to the incident, you might be wondering? Although Pereira dismissed his opponent's post-fight celebration, other fighters seemed to take offense. Many called out the title winner for his childish display. Henry Cejudo, another MMA fighter, responded to the incident on his own YouTube channel. In a video, he urged Pereira to request a rematch against Adesanya. The American MMA fighter cited that Pereira has more wins over his rival, then argued that Adesanya's got the last laugh with his recent win. Cejudo also cited Adesanya mocking his son as a reason to request another rematch with him, going so far as to say that he was angry for Pereira. Another fighter who reacted to the situation and gave his input is Michael Bisping. Bisping backed Adesanya, saying that the winner was totally justified in his post-fight antics. He argued that there were two key reasons for Adesanya being in the right. The first is that Pereira's son mocking him initially could be seen as disrespectful. The fact that the winner responded in the same fashion was totally valid. As for the second reason, Bisping argued that Pereira could have told his son not to mock anyone who gets knocked out. He then suggested that the winner may have taught the child that lesson. Although people have called out the middleweight champ, it doesn't seem like he's going to lose any fights or face any consequences. It makes sense, since there really weren't any significant outcomes to the mocking of his opponent and his son. This also isn't the first time a fighter has mocked someone else in a similar fashion. Another incidence of this happened all the way back in 1995. In that year, the UFC saw Tank Abbott mock his opponent John Matua after a knockout win. While this is an instance of one fighter mocking another in the cage, it's worth noting because of how similar it is to the Adesanya-Pereira incident. Back then, Abbott knocked his opponent out fairly quickly in the first round. He then mimicked his opponent's pose on the floor to mock him for getting knocked out. The pose was seen as being in poor taste. However, it was also this type of behavior that contributed to Abbott becoming a standout in the league. Mixed martial arts is a fast-paced and competitive sport, and it can be especially competitive when it comes to title fights and rivalries. Both of those aspects, plus trash talking, were obvious factors in the bout between Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira. When Adesanya finally knocked his rival out and got his title back, he was eager to celebrate it. Part of that celebration involved returning the taunt he received from Pereira's son. There's no doubt that it's petty, as Adesanya himself has confirmed, but he's caught a lot of heat for his actions because they were directed towards a child. Many have come out either defending him or calling him out for his antics. While it's not the first instance of UFC trash-talking and mocking getting controversial, it's certainly one of the more unique cases. With many calling for a rematch between the two fighters, it'll be interesting to see what happens after that match if it ends up happening.